Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. Today's guest is Roger Baxter. He's the chief economist of the Chamber of Mines. Roger, I imagine you got a few more grey hairs over the past few weeks.
Rick, yeah, I think actually my grey hairs don't come out on my head. They actually are internalized. So I'm afraid I don't quite have the distinguished look yet, but I've been trying hard.
Well, we've seen some of the, most violent and, uncommon activity within the mining sector during the past month or so. What is your perception of what the structural issues are in the mining industry to have led to these illegal strikes?
I don't think it's just an issue related to the mining, to the activities or the issues which the mining industry itself is involved in. I think there's a much broader level of detail, a complex layer of issues that have come to the fore. So, if we just look at the Marikana example, we've had the fastest urbanizing area in South Africa. We've had the fastest growing area in South Africa. We've had a lot of people coming into the area looking for opportunities in the platinum belt. We've had a big increase in economic activity, et cetera, and infrastructure hasn't kept pace. Skills and education infrastructure hasn't kept pace. Housing infrastructure hasn't kept pace. And it's all parties have a role to play in helping to resolve these types of issues. So I think it's a little bit more complicated. When we get into the strike activity, there are a number of issues. I don't think this is something that just happened this year where a bunch of workers got up and decided that they were unhappy with their conditions of work. There's been a few issues that have been happening over the past year or so. So it's a confluence of factors that have led to the activities, and obviously we're working very hard collectively with government, labour, emerging unions and others to try and resolve the issues.
Do you think it's been handled well from the chamber side as well as other employers within the sector?
I think we've done a huge amount actually getting our members together, working with the mining companies themselves, engaging government. We don't spend a huge amount of time engaging in the media space on our bilateral engagements that we've had with government. So we've had a wide range of engagements with government, highlighting the particular challenges, working together on understanding what the potential solutions are. And, it's finger pointing is interesting on these types of challenges, etc. But finger pointing ain't going to get us anywhere. It's really collective as industry, as business through the chamber, government and labour, which is going to help resolve the issues.
But let's go back. You've been in the industry for 20 years. You were born in South Africa, but you got your schooling in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I spent my first 5 years of existence in South Africa. I wasn't actually born in South Africa. I was born in Zambia, interestingly enough. I wasn't supposed to have been born there, but I arrived a month early when my mother was visiting my father, who was involved in the oil industry at that stage, from South Africa. I spent my first 5-6 years of my life in South Africa.
Corne Krige was also born in Zambia under similar circumstances, I believe.
That's right. So there's a few, but I kind of see myself as an African, but very specifically a South African, because this is really my home and my roots are here, and my ancestry is here. Even my great-grandparents were both born in South Africa on my mother's side, etc. So my roots are here. I spent my sort of formative education years up in Zimbabwe, at junior school and at senior school. I went to a school called Peterhouse, the equivalent of Michael House in Zimbabwe. And when I'd finished, I came back to university in South Africa, to University of KwaZulu-Natal, or University of Natal as it was known in those days.
But you just speaking about the educational system in Zim, those days it was an excellent educational system and a benchmark in Africa. How do you perceive the changes affecting education in Zim since then?
Well, what's fascinating to me is that, I came to university in South Africa, and my first 2 years at university were actually a waste of time, because I'd already done A-levels on the English system of AEB, Associated Examining Board A-levels. And so when I came here, I remember going into my first maths lecture and and only going to my last maths lecture, and I still managed to, I think I got 72% in the exam, having not done too much work, having played too much rugby. But I think when we reflect on the educational systems, what was interesting about that educational system is that it was teaching youngsters how to be creative problem solvers. It wasn't teaching youngsters to be parrot fashion learners. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we've got in South Africa, is that too many of our kids are doing matric on the basis of a sort of parrot fashion learning approach. You kind of know roughly what the questions that are going to be asked, and you kind of know roughly what the answers are that you should have. when you write an A-level examination, they ask you a set of totally different questions. You've got to have the problem-solving ability and demonstrate that. And that's what I think we've got to start really ingraining in our education system. Yeah, we've got to start getting youngsters that are problem solvers, not parrot fashion learners.
And going back to Natal, you studied to become an economist. Did you get there and you thought, I really want to become an economist?
Yes, Rake, initially, my initial aspiration as a youngster was actually to become a medical doctor. But when I got along the lines a bit, it's not because I'm squeamish or anything like that. The economics and business world was quite fascinating to me. And so, yes, I spent 5 years at University of KwaZulu-Natal doing postgraduate there also. Really enjoyed it. I worked with some very, very interesting lecturers and very skilled people who had actually been global best practice type individuals in their own right. People like Stan Paolo, etc. So it was very good, but I think my real introduction to the world came when I joined the mining industry in 1992.
But you've not only been within the mining industry, you've also belonged to BUSA, and you were very involved with the development of economic policy. How did that form you? Obviously, to formulate policy is extremely difficult if you need to also focus on while it is being implemented. Especially the days at BUSA, how did you experience those days?
I think a very exciting time in South Africa's history. I go back to the days of the old Business South Africa, which was then amalgamated with the Black Business Council into Business Unity South Africa as it is known today. I was privileged enough to have chaired the Economic Policy Committee for 4 years. I also chaired the Growth Committee and was involved in a wide range of different economic policy discussions on industrial policy, macroeconomic policy, as well as obviously in the mining sector being involved in the discussions around the mining charter, new minerals legislation, etc. So it's been a very, very interesting journey, sometimes frustrating along the way, because I think sometimes we focus too much on some of the specific issues without looking at the broader picture as to how we've actually done a lot of things right as a country. We got our macroeconomic policies absolutely spot on. It's the microeconomics that are not working in South Africa. We've got too much red tape in business. If you want to apply for a mining right, you have to deal with 3 different government departments to get environmental permits organized. So it's very challenging. So it's more at the micro level where we need to be focusing, and I think that's where the stakeholders really need to focus now.
But does that suggest we've got good policy but bad implementation, or bad policy and bad implementation?
I think our macroeconomic policies are absolutely fine. I think our mining policies are absolutely fine. I think we are doing a bit of work to improve the mining policies in cooperation with government. So that's a process that has been ongoing under the MIGDET process. But I guess it's each of the different government departments have their own sort of territory, as it were, and it hasn't been that easy to get them to see that having a one-stop shop type approach to, for example, environmental permitting would just make life a lot easier. It's not that companies don't want to be regulated; they just want smart tape, not red tape.
Going forward, do you think you'll be an economist until you retire?
My colleagues often say to me, Roger, you're one of the few humble economists that we know, but being a humble economist is, I guess, a bit of an oxymoron, which some of my colleagues have said to me. No, I am a humble economist. I think I'll always be an economist at heart. In my journeys around the world, I can't help but comparing the economic policies of other countries to South Africa. Going into the supermarkets and looking at what the prices are there, what the incomes are, and what they are equivalent in South Africa. So I'm certainly an economist at heart, and I've been humbled by being able to be part of the evolving policy debates in South Africa. We've got so much right, but we've also got a lot of areas which need to be improved on. And I think again a cooperative, coordinated approach between government, business, and labour in resolving many of these of the microeconomic policy issues would actually put us in a greater standing, and would prevent the type of action that we're seeing at the moment, the illegal strike activity.
Would you advise third year, fourth year students in BCom or a commerce direction or course to become an economist?
I think the economics field is a very interesting one. Of course, it depends which university you go to. If you I guess it's not like a chartered accountancy degree where once you've done a CTA and you've done the CA, you know exactly where you come from. I would encourage people who are really passionate about economics and the economy and making a contribution to South Africa and to Africa and to the world. that economics at the undergraduate level is very useful, but I don't think it's enough. You've got to do at least postgrad at a master's level to really be able to make a difference and to get into the workplace. And then obviously, as young as you can, but after a couple of years of experience, it's not a bad idea to do a doctorate. I've on a couple of occasions been asked the question, well, Roger, why haven't you done a doctorate? And when I was going through the process of doing one about 10 years ago, Professor Duncan Reiki from the Wits Business School said to me, he said, Roger, you've done probably 20 PhDs in your life through the work that you've been doing, so rather keep on with the work that you're doing and keep on with the process. So it's a fascinating area. It doesn't involve a huge amount of people, so unless you're really passionate about the area and you want to go and do further studies and really get involved in the industry, then don't get involved. But I've certainly enjoyed it. It's been a really very interesting part of my life.
So, obviously in any industry, experience is really important. Obviously that also is the case for being an economist.
That's right. I mean, I've been very fortunate in working in the mining industry that I've been exposed to so many different facets of economic policy making in the country as a whole. So I don't think if you're confined to maybe one or two specific sectors that you would have possibly been exposed to as much, through Business Unity South Africa, through the BUSA experience, through being involved in NEDLAC, through spending a lot of time with many of the different components of ministers within cabinet, etc., and trying to make a difference and engaging on these things and feeling that you can make a difference. It was one of the reasons why I felt it important to come back to South Africa, having spent 7 months out of the country in Canada. Coming back here, you can make a real difference, but you got to get the experience. You got to work with good colleagues, and I've been fortunate in that regard.
Not many economists make it on their own. Usually the good economists are linked to some of the bigger firms. Is that the case, or do you think there is some entrepreneurial element to being an economist?
I think there are, but I think generally what happens is it's very difficult for a young, just starting economist to set out on their own and make a tangible difference, because the economics game is, I would say, 20% academic knowledge and 80% experience and wisdom. And you can only develop wisdom over time. I think there's a wonderful expression by Aristotle, the famous philosopher, who said that knowledge is something that you gain by sitting in the classroom, but wisdom is something that you gain through observation. And so once you've got the experience, then it becomes easier to set up your own consultancies and to work in small units. And I know a lot of my colleagues, Christa Lace, for example, and others who have set up their own units and actually been quite successful in the dynamic debate.
Mike Schussler as well.
And Mike Schussler and guys like him, exactly. So it's not, you don't have to be tied necessarily to the big corporates. I've enjoyed working in a big corporate environment and working with the leadership of the industry. I've been really blessed to have been a participant in engaging with so many different interesting characters in the chief executives of the mining companies. And I must say the existing group of people, the leadership of the industry now, are some really astute, very committed South Africans who see a big role for the mining sector in South Africa, and we're trying to get everyone to realize that.
How do you think the South African economists, you get a sense that many of them are really dynamic. How do they compare with international peers?
I have spent quite a bit of time traveling around the world, engaging with economists all over the world, in the World Bank, in the IMF, in various institutions around the world. Our economists are just as good as the top in the world, in my humble view. So I think there's nothing that we've got that we are missing. We've also have a set of challenges domestically, which I think many of these other countries, the advanced economies, don't necessarily have, so they may be focused at a different level. Sometimes some of their economists become very, very specialized in one particular area. In South Africa, I think we tend to get more involved in a wide range of different activities. If I look at what I've been involved in, minerals policy, beneficiation policy, tax policy, macro policy, micro policy. So I've been involved in so many different angles. It's been absolutely fascinating.
That was Roger Baxter, Chief Economist of the Chamber of Mines.